Hi everyone, I'm Ian Fales. Welcome back to THU TV. Thanks for joining me this week for lots of visual effects and animation interviews. Got a pretty special one coming up with director Shannon Tindle. Hey Shannon, how you doing, man?
Doing great.
Yeah, this is your first time at THU, right?
It is.
How are you finding it?
Look at this. This is amazing.
It is.
It's absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very unique conference. It's great because you're interacting with artists of all kinds. I think it's true what Andre says, is there are no VIPs. You can talk to whoever you want to.
Yeah.
You can sit and really have a nice conversation. And then, of course, it's here in Malta.
Yeah.
Which is stunning.
I know.
I'll go out at like 1 in the morning and just walk around.
Absolutely. I keep discovering little streets,
Yeah.
you know, that I'm probably not meant to be in.
Yeah. Yeah, it's incredible.
Yeah. Whenever we get together at other events and just for other interviews, I always consider you such a student of animation. You know, you're in the animation industry. You're a director. You've done so many great things, and we're going to cover those things. But I feel like you really have immersed yourself in animation, perhaps more than others. And I kind of want to follow that track. You know, basically starting from the beginning and what sort of led you to want to be in animation, directing animation, being creative. Can we go back to the beginning?
Sure.
What do you think was it, if there was something in your childhood or school or teenage years that kind of started forming the basis of wanting to be so creative?
Well, I would say it's less about animation, more about art. I had a grandmother who was an amateur artist. I grew up, she had the stacks of the Andrew Loomis books that she kept at the house. She always had pencil and paper, so whenever I would stay with her, it was just me drawing all day. And I was kind of I call myself a closeted introvert. I think people who meet me think I'm extroverted.
Yeah.
I would probably prefer to be in a hole drawing or writing.
Which actually makes THU pretty perfect. Because if you walk around here, people are literally sitting there drawing, but in groups, right?
Yeah.
So it's not, in some ways they're not on there.
And I'll force myself to kind of go and introduce myself to people, and then once I engage, I feel good about it. But so that was the beginning. I started to draw, I watched movies, I was obsessed with movies and drawing. But growing up where I grew up in rural Kentucky, there aren't a whole lot of people that do that. So ultimately, I was pre-med. I was a biology major, and I have an incredible family. And my dad just said, "You're doing really well. Your grades are good, but you don't seem to be into this. What do you want to do?" And I said, "I want to get into film. I want to go to Cal Arts." And so he supported that, and off I went to kind of begin my career. But I've always been. I'm kind of an obsessive learner. I'm a student of things, and I will get really focused on something. Any of my friends will tell you, once I get kind of obsessed with something, like I get deep into it. Yeah. My current obsession being vintage fountain pens.
Okay.
Like how the nibs are made, because how can I get the proper line width that I want?
Should we talk for the next 20 minutes about fountain pens?
Let's do it.
Okay, here we go.
Hey, with the hashtag vintage fountain pens, and we'll get a lot of hits with that community. But nobody on this end will, like, on the film, they're like, what's he talking about? He sounds like an old man. So, yeah.
For people who don't know, tell us a bit more about Cal Arts and why it's the school, or why, you know, people really want to go there.
So it started as the Shannon Institute. And it was an art school, it was a dance school. They had all these different disciplines there. Really, really great school. And it eventually, Walt Disney was a huge supporter of the school. And at one point he had kind of this vision for another school, so he merged I believe it was the Chenard School with, was it a music school? Or the Cal Arts Alumni Association is going to hate me for not getting my history accurate. But essentially, it kind of grew out of a dream that he had, and it became, they had their first animation program, I believe, at the debut, like 1971 or something. Yep. And I think Glenn Keane was part of that program. and so you just find out, and it's close to the industry. So it's near LA. It's just outside of LA County. So a lot of the teachers and faculty that you have are folks in the industry. Like my story teacher was Steve Anderson, who's an amazing director at Disney Feature Animation. I had, Jules Engel was there still teaching on the experimental side. You had, it's really just been an amazing group. And even from the Chenard history, my father-in-law worked in animation, and he went there, and the story he tells, to get into the school, the portfolio that he put together, he had to show it to Edith Head, Mark Davis, and Don Graham.
Easy.
And yeah, I know, it's like very intimidating. So I found out about the history of the school. I found out about it actually going to Disney World, because that's growing up closer to the East Coast. That's where I used to go. And somebody mentioned it when I was there in the kind of little animation tour that they had. And I was like, well, let me try to get in.
How did you get in? What did you have to do?
I didn't get in at first. I had like a month to put a portfolio together. I'd never done that before.
Of just artwork or any kind
like
of
live
moving?
I didn't know what to do. I'd never done it before, so I thought, well, here's some drawings. Let me do some drawings. And I didn't get in. And my dad was kind of, he called the school up and said, look, does he have a chance or not? I said, well, we're not really supposed to say, but he almost made it in. And so then I spent the next year working a full-time job so I could save money in case I got in, because it's not cheap. And then I worked a second shift job, so I'd go to the zoo every day, I'd take a sketchbook everywhere, and I just obsessively drew. And also, I flew out to meet folks at CalArts, so I met Corny Cole, and Corny was just an amazing guy, and he would send me letters, handwritten letters with artists I should study and look at and what I should do to get the portfolio. He was very generous, and that second time I got in.
Do you remember what you did? What artwork you showed? What you kind of
there were a lot of zoo drawings. There was, and I still have it. I had a self-portrait. This is so embarrassing. I haven't even told Glenn this. I had a self-portrait of Ariel from Little Mermaid kissing my cheek like I was underwater, and I used a hairdryer to blow my hair up so it looked like I was underwater, and I was like fake held my breath.
Oh, come on.
Oh yeah.
Put that on Instagram.
I should totally put it on. I'm like, guys, check it out. This is the kind of art I do. So that was in there. But it was a lot of life drawing. I took life drawing classes. I took, again, zoo drawing, sketchbook. And I actually put a photo in there in the portfolio submission of me, and I had a stack of like 20 or 30 sketchbooks I'd filled in that year. Yeah, and then the portfolio. So that's what the work was. And again, it was guided by what advice I was being given by Corny as to what they wanted to see.
Right. Now, just to give a bit of flavour about what happens at CalArts, you actually mostly do multiple types of animated filmmaking, right?
Yeah, you do. You can on experimental you can get into CG, stop motion, hand drawn. When I was there, it was still very much hand drawn because I started in '97 and it was like the crash hadn't yet happened, but you could feel it happening. I think Hercules was the film that was out at that time, but also Toy Story had just come out in '95, so Pixar was kind of the new, very popular kid on the block.
Yeah. Ants was just about to happen in '98. PDI, DreamWorks.
Yeah, so it was a big push towards CG, but that didn't change the philosophy of the school. But really, you study animation, and when you have your animation teachers. Like I had Mike Wing, who's an amazing hand-drawn animator. I had him, but you study film. When I took Steve Anderson's story class, we were studying live-action films. Same thing with Mark Kennedy's class. We were watching like Visions of Light, which introduced me to a lot of films that I hadn't seen, and it really had a much more of a bent towards a film school, and using animation as a medium to. You study writing, you study life drawing, all these different disciplines, and then you're really bolstered by your fellow classmates. There's a great spirit of friendly competition, and like in the class just 2 years ahead of me were Pete Sohn, Shane Prigmore, all these guys now who were, Pete's directing at Pixar, Shane's an executive at Disney, who are still good friends, and having that level of talent really pushes you to work harder. So So yeah, it was a really great experience.
It sounds amazing. What did you do immediately after finishing at CalArts?
I actually started working my my second semester of my second year, which was great because I was poor. I had no money, and I wouldn't tell my parents this because I would never ask them for money. Except they kind of found out when I remember going back home. Now this is not exaggeration, and I had lost 25 pounds, which I could use to lose that again. And they were like, "Oh my God, what's happened to you?" "No, I'm fine, Mom and Dad." But my second semester, I got a job doing character design for Mickey Mouse Works. Basically, a few weeks on that, and I got paid more money than I'd ever made. And it was really great. And I worked with a lot of great people there. It was Tony Craig and Rick Schneider, and just learned from great people there. And I worked there during my second semester, which I could do because it was no issue for my biology and calculus and chemistry credits to transfer. So when I went to CalArts, all of that stuff was out of the way, and I could just focus on art and filmmaking. So
right. And did you keep working during study, or was it only that?
I left after my second year, actually.
Oh,
so
okay.
Second year, I got hired to work at Warner Brothers. No, I got hired to work at Disney TV on the ill-fated Clerks television show.
Right.
Doing character layout. And then I moved to Warner Brothers to work on Static Shock after that as a character designer. So.
Okay. And I guess it'd be great to see if the mood then, did you feel like you were well on your way? Or did you feel like you knew nothing and, you were...
I still feel like I know nothing. I honestly, I don't ever feel like because there's always something more I wanted to do. And because when I got out, I always wanted to do my own thing. I wanted to create my own stories. So I was always doing that while I was working full time. And I'm surrounded by people that are way better than me. They're better writers, better designers, better artists than me. So I always feel like I have more to learn, which again, as me being an obsessive learner, I'm totally fine with. I think when you reach that point when you feel like you've made it, as an artist, you're dead. You really are. You're not gonna. You just kind of flatline and you create the same things over and over. And I never want to do that. So.
Wow. Maybe also give us a flavour of what it means to be a character designer or a designer on an animated project, because maybe the glamorous thing people think is to do the animation, but there's all this other work obviously that goes on before that.
Well, I've actually found, when I was in school, everybody wanted to be an animator. Yeah. Now everybody wants to be a character designer, a viz dev artist.
Yeah.
And so what it takes, and this is something that I say when I'm meeting with younger artists who want to get into it, and it's getting tougher now for me to say these things because there will be people who I'm giving advice to who have way more Instagram followers than I do. But there are a lot of folks who can do beautiful drawings and beautiful designs, but they can't work in a different style. They can't turn those drawings. They can't do expression to those characters. And that's the technical, day-to-day production side of it. You have to be able to interpret those characters from different angles and have them acting and really think of it as a character in a story rather than just a pretty drawing.
And you, I guess, need to fit in with someone else's vision when it's not your own.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which can be tricky, right? Because it's about taking criticism or doing changes, iterations.
Yeah. I'm stubborn. So I always have an opinion about things, but I also know, as a designer before, if it got to the point where it's like, look, the director is the one who's going to get all the criticism if this is not good. And so I'm going to try and follow that vision as best I can. At the same time, when you hire me, you're not just hiring for my skills as an artist. I think you're hiring me for my taste and my opinions. So if you ask me, I'm going to give you an honest one.
Right.
But when you say, I don't want your opinion anymore, great, I'll move on to another show, or we'll agree that this is going to be the style. I actually love working in different styles. I think it's a great challenge. So, yeah.
What was one of your perhaps more memorable and favourable projects in those early days? Was it the Foster's, I always forget the name of it, Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends? I
love working on Foster's.
Yeah.
That was the first time that I supervised on a show, which was a lot of fun because we already had a lot of talented artists on it. And then, it's funny because you're saying early days, it seems so recent to me, but I moved from Foster's to do Coraline after that. And Coraline was something that really, Henry pushes artists very hard.
This is Henry Selick.
Henry Selick, yeah. He pushes artists very hard, but in the best way. And so he pushed me to do things I didn't know I was capable of. And that was, for me, a new standard. For me, personally, that you can always get better, it can always get better. So that was the thing that I was, and still am very proud of, is working on Coraline with Henry and with being surrounded. The bullpen of artists on that show were John Klassen, Dan Kroll, Chris Applehan, Shane Prigmore, Steph Choi. We're all in this little pod together, no walls really, and we all just kind of pushed each other in the best way.
Was the fact that it was a stop motion film, did that require a different feeling or approach to character design?
No, what's actually insane to me, and it's a philosophy I've brought over to CG. CG truly, almost anything is possible, but they don't treat it as such. In stop motion, where you have to literally deal with gravity and real materials, they're a lot more adventurous in the style. And I don't know if it's just because of the point of view of the artists who tend to do stop motion or on the fringe, I think sometimes. So I try to bring some of that sensibility over to CG and say, look guys, we don't have to deal with any of this. And I never bought off on, you'll get the things where they say, like if you design a character and you make him really short and stubby with short arms and he's heavy, well that's gonna be tough for him to get in the truck. As it would be for a real person like that, which adds character to the animation. I don't want everything to be even and generic, and that just bores me, and it doesn't lead to good ideas. And so...
Design for Coraline, the neighbor, the blue...
Mr. Robinski, yeah.
Tell us a bit about the philosophy behind that design.
So this is a crazy story. So Dan Kroll had done a bunch of the initial designs, beautiful, beautiful work, and then we started to look at Ronald Searle and kind of Henry's direction. I'm a huge fan and student of Searle's work. And I remember Shane had spent several weeks working on the character. And then Henry's like, let's shake it up. Let's have you do a couple of things. And Shane had done some beautiful work on it. And I put him in a lineup, and Henry kind of liked the design. And then 5 minutes after the meeting, Sarah Serrata, who's actually producing his new film, she was the art department coordinator. She comes up to me and she says, so Henry just had a note. He wants you to make him a giant. And I was like, what are you talking about? Make him a giant. And I just did a quick silhouette. It's actually on the DVD, I think. I did a really quick silhouette. I did it in 5 minutes, and I just made him a giant. And I thought, it works. And so it was based on the work that Dan and Shane did, and then Henry's direction with proportion. And then I added a little bit of a few details. There's a rumor going around on Reddit that the medal that he's wearing is a Survivors of Chernobyl medal. I won't disavow that.
Still a rumor.
It is, I'll just say it is. Like doing research, he's Russian. I'm like, what interesting story. I'm always looking for the story in the character. So what can we add that's extra? So I love when people find those details. So that's the approach. I also designed the bat versions of the Scotty dogs, and that was just awesome. Shane designed the Scotty dogs, and then I was able to take them in this monstrous direction. And then we got to work with Kent Melton, who just pluses everything you do. So,
okay. What was the project that came after Coraline, or the next major thing for you?
Actually, I'm always doing multiple things. Yeah. So while I was doing Coraline, I'd actually sold a pilot to Cartoon Network with Shane and Andy, Andy Schuler, who's a good friend. He's at DreamWorks now, and we wrote it, storyboarded it, and then we did all the scratch voices. And Andy had a little wine cellar at his house in Oregon because we were all working on Coraline together. We cut it. I mean, we made the animatic for the pilot at Andy's house, and then we flew out to Cartoon Network to show it, and we did that pilot. And that was interesting because we were asked to do an 11-minute pilot, and we weren't keeping track of how long it was. So when we flew it in, we didn't know how long it was, and I remember we handed it off to Craig McCracken and Brian at Cartoon Network for them to watch, and we just sat while they watched it. We weren't in the room.
Yeah.
And Craig comes out and he goes, the bad news is It's 22 minutes long. He says, the good news is we loved it.
Oh, okay.
So we had made it the length of a full 22-minute episode.
Yeah. And they weren't bored.
No, they weren't bored. They liked it.
Yeah.
So that's what I did after that, is that we did that pilot. So then we went into production on the pilot. We tested it. It tested well. There was a change in power while we were there.
Yeah.
They decided not to make it, and at that point I had shifted over to DreamWorks to work.
Right. And one of the films you worked on there was The Croods, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I worked on Croods early on. In the beginning, it was just myself and Shane and Chris Sanders just playing, and that was a blast. I had an incredible time on that.
Yeah. When did you get the idea for Kubo? This is Kubo and the Two Strings. I don't think I even mentioned up at the beginning, but this is basically your idea.
Yeah. So it was an idea that I had in 2001. I was reading Lafcadio O'Hearn's translation of Kwaidan, it's a collection of Japanese folk tales, and at the same time, I had just met my wife. And I met her mother very early on. Her mother had dementia, but was a very sweet, funny lady who I just adored. And as a gift for my wife, I did this piece of artwork. I wrote a story about a woman who is, because her mother also had polio when she was young. She was in a wheelchair. And I thought there's this beautiful personality that people don't get to see because she's kind of stuck in the house, and what it would be like if a kid had to take care of the parent. And so that's where the initial story came from, and I thought nobody would ever make this into a film. And I worked on it and developed it, and then around 2012 I pitched it. I remember I pitched it in September of 2012 to Leica. They bought it 2 weeks later, and we started writing in January of 2013.
Did you always imagine it as a stop motion film?
Yeah, I intentionally, because I like the handmade quality of Japanese art, and I thought it would make, and also because the stop motion studios were doing the more interesting things, I knew a mainstream studio would never make that story. They would never say yes to opening a story where a baby has had his eye ripped out by the grandfather.
Yeah.
Which is, it's part of fairy tales. You will read those fairy tales like that to your kids, but for some reason, you put it up on screen and people act offended by it. But it's like, no, these stories are part of everybody's culture, so.
And perhaps again, for people who don't know, do these stop motion films, do they effectively get made in full as boards and animatics, or is it also still an always evolving process?
It's iterative, I would say, with at least the process that's the only one that I'm aware of is at Leica. I'm sure it's different elsewhere. Is you have to lock sequences off, which is tough because you're locking sequences off in isolation when you want to say, well, what about the sequences around it? Because you're trying to get it out to set. When you're shooting, you have 52 units shooting or more, and you have to get it out to set so you can shoot it. So it's a challenge.
Yeah. And I guess another sort of general challenge that directors and people who work in animation have to face is like the Cartoon Network thing and just any project. Sometimes it goes, sometimes it doesn't go. You know, things change. You're doing multiple things at once.
Yeah.
How have you developed a resilience for this? How, you know, and what sort of advice would you give?
I'm going through it right now. It's like I had a film that I was writing, directing at Sony for 2 years.
Yeah.
They decided not to move forward with it, but they were very generous in that they're allowing me to shop it around. And
right.
I won't say more than I'm very happy that they've allowed me to do that.
Yeah.
And I think it's got a chance at life elsewhere.
But I guess the truth is it's quite common.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. It's not a out of the blue thing.
It happens all the time, and you have to be prepared for it. But I think part of the thing that builds your tough skin, it's like I'll do 500 character designs for a project, or I'll take 5 passes at a sequence and we'll get edited and cut. You just kind of get used to things changing. And I like to get stuff made. I was lucky with Kubo. The turnaround on that project was they bought it. We started making it in 2013, and it was released in 2012.
Yeah.
And we started making it it came out in 2016. So it's a really fast turnaround for animation.
Yeah, incredible. Well, one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about, and we've only got a little bit of time now, which is fine, is being a student of animation. And tell me about your watching habits or viewing habits, or, you know, you interact with a lot of people as well in the industry. What is that like as a director?
I would say it's more when I got out of school, because the industry had kind of died. They weren't hiring for features any longer, and I had to move from studio to studio. because TV is more, it's more cyclical. There's more, because you're on hiatus, you have to move to another studio. So I got to know a lot of people, and it didn't seem like a blessing at the time, but it ended up being a blessing because I got to know a lot of people. So if I wanted to pitch something, I could say, hey, can I come over and pitch this thing? And I had a good relationship with an executive or a producer, and they say, yeah, sure. Being a student in animation, I'm just a student, period. I watch a fair amount of animated films, but I watch a lot more live action films.
Yes, films is just as much education.
Films, period. Yeah. I get up very early in the morning, and it's usually writing. So I get up at like 5 o'clock in the morning and I'm writing, but Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays are my movie mornings.
Okay.
So it's all quiet in the house. I put headphones on so I don't wake anybody up, and I watch a movie I hadn't seen before.
Oh, really?
And so, and then I'll write about the movie. I have a journal that I keep and my thoughts on the film and ideas. So that's where, you know, it's kind of, it's just, I love it. And I love television, so I'll watch series.
Yeah.
TV is better than it's ever been, so.
What is, if you can remember, what's the last film that you have seen?
Let's see, what is it?
It's hard to remember, isn't it, sometimes? Or a recent one, perhaps.
I saw one recently that blew me away. They had an Academy screening of this film called Goyokin, which is, it's Tachiya Nakadai. I've seen a lot of samurai films. I hadn't seen this one. There was only one print, and they flew it into the Academy from the Japanese National Film Archive, and that was a really incredible film experience. To see it on film, beautiful Technicolor, and it's by a director who's normally known for doing like gangster films in Japan, but he did this one samurai film, and it was really great. I really loved that. I just rewatched Paris, Texas.
Oh man,
mind-blowing film, really incredible. I just rewatched all of Satoshi Kon's films again. Like I'll pick a director and just kind of go, let me go back through their work, or if I haven't explored their work before, I'll go through it. Yeah. I'm in a Jacques Tati groove right now, so yeah.
Well, I mean, I think that's the best education you can do, is watch what's out there and then watch what you might not have seen before and rewatch it as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, Shannon, it's been great talking to you about all that stuff, man.
Great, thanks.
Thanks for coming along. And keep up with THU TV this week. We're on YouTube and streaming on Facebook. Thanks so much, guys. I'll see you later.